Welcome back to Endangered Species Spotlight. This week we're talking about the sockeye salmon, or as I've kind of always heard them locally, the Kokanee salmon. So I'm sure most people have eaten or at the very least heard of salmon at one point, and so this is kind of what most people think of salmon, just a regular little fish that you find in the grocery store. But what some people aren't aware of, especially if you're not from Canada, where the sockeye and kokanee are very common, you might not know the bonkers life cycle of them. So they start out, they have normal fish, you look at this and go that's a fish. But then when it gets to mating season, they go through this bonkers transformation. This is the breeding form of a male kokanee salmon. And they also do this massive migration. So most of the life they are living just in the ocean, in the sea, just doing their thing. But when it comes to mating season, every year, all of the salmon, males and females, they get together and they travel back to the place that they were spawned. They migrate, and over the course of the migration, they turn from that little silverfish into this absolute unit. They travel upstream the rivers up to where they were spawned from, where their legs were initially laid, and then they left to go to the ocean. They return there. Then they basically have what is a giant salmon fuckfest, where they release all of the gametes into the water, they get fertilized, and then the adult fish die. And that is the end of their life cycle, the end. Now, this process is very, very important in so many different things. These salmon are a keystone species in many contexts. In addition to the spawning being the last stage of the life cycle and therefore very important to the salmon, they are also a very, very important food source for things like bears and eagles and ospreys, etc. Since there are so many of them going into these locations and then dying, there is a lot of nutrients available, which provides, especially bears, a lot of the nutrients they need to get through the winter. They provide food for eagles and everything. So they're very important as a food source for other animals. They are also very, very important in replenishing nutrients in soil and stuff. So there's all of the salmon die. All of them. There's so many dead salmon, and that replenishes nutrients in the water, as well as when they if they get washed up on shore, or if a bear drags them on the shore, or if an eagle grabs them and drops them, they return the nutrients into the soil, because there's no way that the bears and eagles can eat all of them, so some of them are just left and they decompose and they release their nutrients into the soil, which then allows for lush and very thick plant life. This is especially important in old-growth forests such as the Great Bear Rainforest in BC, where I live. The soil there is really good, and that is in part due to the nutrients from the salmon that spawn in the lakes and streams in the Great Bear Rainforest. Additionally, especially around Canada and BC, where I live, they are also a keystone species in cultural contexts. Fuck me. They have been very important to many local indigenous groups in the area. Again, as a food source, because there is so much fish here, you cannot let that go to waste. If they're there, why not use them? So as a food source, they are very important, as well as just culturally in multiple different contexts to multiple different indigenous groups. And even to non-indigenous people like me, because in elementary school, we had multiple areas where the salmon would come spawning through every year, and on every year for most of elementary school, my class would take field trips and go see the kokanee spawning, go learn about their life cycle, go learn about their cultural importance and environmental importance. So they're pretty well known, at least in my province where I live. So yeah, the Kokanee salmon, they are a keystone species. They're super important. However, since we are on Endangered Species Spotlight, we know what that means. They are, this is kind of an interesting one. So there is quite a large population of salmon, but since they're so important in every context, they are like considered, I think, threatened. I have to check it out. They're vulnerable or threatened. This is largely due to dams and like plants and stuff on the rivers and streams where the kokanee spawn through. This makes it very, very difficult for the salmon to actually spawn through correctly. It disrupts their migration, it makes it difficult, it causes barriers. So that has been a big problem that governments and like environmental people, like ecologists and everything. So I just kind of looked it up, but there's depends on the area, the conservation status of the kokanee salmon differs. Like some areas they're protected, some areas they're endangered, some areas they're just vulnerable, whatever. So it varies depending on the area. But again, super culturally and environmentally important. So that's kind of why I'm talking about them. So in addition to the dams and disruption of the migration areas, they're also at risk, like most things in the ocean, from pollution, but that's kind of how it goes with the ocean. It's very polluted. So yeah, kokanee salmon are very interesting, very important. I recommend looking up like their cultural and environmental importance because it is actually very fascinating.